The night air was thick with smoke as Thomas stood trembling, clutching a rusted sword while his breath came in ragged gasps. Marcus said, "Do it, boy. Prove your loyalty," his voice cutting through the cold silence like a blade. Thomas stared at Eleanor, who knelt before him, whispering, "Please, Thomas, don't." Torchlight flickered against the mud walls, casting monstrous shadows that twisted like specters. Behind Marcus, soldiers shifted restlessly, armor clinking like distant church bells. Thomas's chest tightened as his mind waged war between duty and compassion. Marcus barked, "Hesitate again, and you join her fate." Daniel lingered in the darkness, his expression unreadable. Eleanor's sob shattered the silence as Thomas raised his trembling sword, knowing this single act would ignite a storm that could never be undone. Thomas stumbled through the shattered streets, Eleanor's cries still echoing in his mind. Daniel followed closely, breaking the silence with a soft voice. "You did what you had to." Thomas spat bitterly. "Did I, or did I just destroy myself?" Smoke curled from burned homes as starving mothers clutched their children. Soldiers marched past without a glance, their boots striking like war drums. Marcus's cold command haunted Thomas's thoughts, each memory cutting deeper. Daniel's tone sharpened. "There's talk of rebellion, Thomas. We don't have to live like this." Thomas shook his head, whispering, "Fight them? That's not rebellion, that's suicide." The moonlit ruins stretched endlessly, a graveyard for hope. Marcus stood atop the ruined watchtower as dawn crept through the haze. His voice thundered, "Order is restored through strength." Below, villagers huddled together, terrified. Soldiers dragged away those accused of rebellion, while Eleanor's absence gnawed at Thomas, who watched from the shadows. A desperate villager cried out, "We starve while you feast." Marcus smiled coldly and gestured to a soldier, who struck the man down without hesitation. Thomas's fists clenched until his knuckles whitened. Daniel whispered, "This is the man you'd face if you rebel." Marcus's voice boomed again, "Loyalty is survival, defiance is death." Silence crushed the crowd like a weight. In a dim tavern corner, Daniel sat across from Thomas, voice low and smooth. "You can trust me, Thomas," he said. Thomas hesitated, eyes scanning the room as he sipped stale ale. Daniel leaned forward, voice urgent. "Marcus plans something worse. We must act before it's too late." Near the door, a figure slipped away, unnoticed, silent as a shadow. Thomas whispered, "Act? Against Marcus? You don't understand his power." Daniel's grip tightened on Thomas's wrist. "I understand it well," he hissed. Outside, distant war drums began to pound. The figure vanished into the mist, carrying secrets that could doom them all. Anna sprinted through a narrow alley, clutching a parchment, breath ragged as the thunder of boots echoed behind her. She flattened against a wall, trembling, as soldiers charged past in pursuit of unseen rebels. Through a cracked door, Anna glimpsed Marcus speaking with Daniel in hushed tones. Her heart pounded as she saw Daniel hand Marcus a scroll. Marcus snarled, "They'll never see this coming." Anna's gasp caught in her throat as she realized betrayal was unfolding before her eyes. She bolted into the fog-drenched street, parchment clutched tight, determined to warn Thomas. A soldier shouted, spotting her, and gave chase as the night erupted with chaos. Thomas walked silently through the charred outskirts of the village, the acrid stench of burnt wood and blood clinging to the night air. Eleanor followed closely, her eyes wide with fear as distant screams echoed through the valley. Thomas muttered, "Marcus has gone too far this time." Eleanor whispered, "If we stay, we'll die like the others." Ahead, soldiers dragged villagers from their homes, their shouts piercing the mist. Marcus barked orders, his voice sharp as steel, commanding loyalty through terror. Thomas's fists clenched as he watched a child ripped from its mother's arms. Daniel emerged from the shadows, speaking softly, "This is only the beginning, Thomas." The wind howled through broken rooftops as Thomas realized war had already begun. Villagers huddled in silence as soldiers patrolled the narrow streets. A baby's cry broke through the night, quickly silenced by a terrified mother. Thomas crouched in an alley, watching as Marcus's men tore down banners of resistance. Eleanor whispered, "They've taken everything from us." Thomas's jaw tightened. In the distance, a bell tolled, hollow and mournful, echoing through the ruins. Daniel appeared at his side, speaking in a low tone. "These people are broken, but they're ready to rise if given hope." Thomas glanced toward the frightened faces of villagers, realizing the rebellion could be more than a dream. Marcus's cold laughter rang out as soldiers set fire to another home, sealing Thomas's decision. Thomas crept through the ruins under the cover of darkness, clutching a tattered map given to him by a hooded figure earlier that night. The shadow figure moved like a phantom ahead of him, silent and precise. Eleanor whispered, "Can we trust them?" Thomas murmured, "We don't have a choice." In a dim courtyard, the shadow figure pointed toward a hidden tunnel beneath the old chapel. Daniel frowned, uneasy. "This feels like a trap," he said. The shadow figure's voice was calm but cold. "This path is your only chance to strike back." Distant horns sounded as soldiers neared. Thomas nodded grimly, knowing the rebellion's survival depended on unseen allies. Marcus sat in a lavish war tent, a goblet of wine in hand, while Daniel knelt before him. Marcus's tone was deceptively smooth. "You've served me well, Daniel, but I need more." Daniel's hands trembled as he said, "They trust me completely." Marcus leaned forward, eyes glinting like knives. "Then use that trust. Lead them into ruin." Outside, soldiers drilled with rhythmic shouts, the sound of boots pounding like drums of war. Daniel swallowed hard, nodding, though guilt gnawed at him. Marcus added coldly, "Failure is not an option." The tent flap fluttered in the wind as Daniel realized his betrayal would soon reach its peak. Anna ran breathlessly through the forest, branches whipping against her face as she fled from the burning village. Behind her, soldiers shouted orders, their torches cutting through the darkness like fiery knives. She stumbled into a clearing where Thomas and Eleanor hid among fallen logs. Anna gasped, "They're coming! They destroyed everything!" Eleanor pulled her close, whispering comfort. Thomas scanned the tree line, his heart racing. Daniel appeared suddenly, urging, "We must move now, or we'll all be slaughtered." The distant clash of steel and the cries of the dying filled the night as Thomas led them deeper into the woods, unaware of the betrayal within their ranks. Thomas sat alone beside the dying embers of a small fire, staring at his trembling hands as the night wind rustled the trees. Eleanor approached quietly, her voice soft. "You can't keep blaming yourself," Thomas whispered. "I led them into ruin, Eleanor. How can I lead anyone again?" Daniel stepped from the shadows, speaking sharply. "We have no time for guilt, Thomas. Marcus marches at dawn." The distant thud of war drums rolled through the forest, shaking Thomas to his core. Eleanor knelt beside him, gripping his hands. "You are all we have left," she pleaded. Thomas exhaled, resolve building. "Then we fight," he said, knowing there was no turning back now. The shadow figure emerged silently from the darkness, their hood hiding most of their face. Thomas rose quickly, hand instinctively going to his sword. "D." The shadow figure spoke in a calm, measured voice. "I bring knowledge Marcus does not want you to have." Eleanor's eyes widened as they revealed a map marked with secret supply routes. Daniel crossed his arms, suspicious. "Why help us now?" The shadow figure replied, "Because his reign threatens us all." The wind carried distant horn blasts as soldiers approached. Thomas studied the map and said, "Then we strike tonight." The shadow figure's gaze lingered on Thomas before vanishing into the shadows once more. Thomas led a small band of rebels through the darkness, their footsteps muffled by damp leaves. Eleanor walked close behind, clutching a dagger with trembling hands. Daniel whispered, "We'll never reach the outpost alive." Thomas growled, "We have to try." As they neared the enemy camp, a guard shouted, and chaos erupted. Arrows whistled through the air, striking the ground near their feet. Eleanor screamed as Thomas raised his sword and charged forward. Daniel fought reluctantly, glancing back at the path they had come. The battle was quick and brutal, the rebels scattering into the trees as Marcus's soldiers fell, leaving silence in their wake. At dawn, Thomas and his companions stumbled into a hidden valley where villagers had been secretly preparing for rebellion. Eleanor gasped at the sight of makeshift weapons and determined faces. A burly blacksmith named Samuel stepped forward, saying, "We've been waiting for someone brave enough to lead." Thomas hesitated, overwhelmed by the expectation in their eyes. Daniel muttered, "This is madness." Eleanor touched Thomas's shoulder gently. "They believe in you," she whispered. Thomas raised his voice, declaring, "Together we will bring Marcus to his knees." Cheers erupted, echoing off the valley walls, as hope began to rise like the morning sun. Night fell as the rebels celebrated their victory, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Daniel slipped away from the firelight, his expression shadowed with guilt. In a secluded grove, he met with Marcus's messenger, a cold-eyed soldier who hissed, "Marcus demands to know their next move." Daniel handed over a rough map of the valley, whispering, "This will end it quickly." The soldiers smirked and vanished into the darkness. Daniel returned to camp, forcing a smile as Eleanor handed him a cup of water. Thomas clapped him on the back gratefully, never suspecting the knife poised above their cause. Thomas marched at the head of his small rebel force, determination etched into every line of his face. Eleanor walked beside him, clutching her dagger tightly as mist clung to the valley floor. Daniel followed silently, his gaze hidden in the shadows of his hood. Samuel carried a heavy hammer, his stride confident and steady. In the distance, Marcus's supply caravan appeared, guarded but vulnerable. Thomas raised his fist, signaling the ambush. Eleanor whispered, "This is our chance to prove we can win." Arrows whistled through the air as the rebels attacked with ferocity. The soldiers faltered, surprised by the sudden strike, and the rebels claimed their first true victory under the pale morning sun. In a candlelit war room, Marcus leaned over a large map, tracing routes with his finger as Daniel stood nearby. Marcus's tone was smooth, but deadly. "They've tasted victory. Good. It will make their fall all the sweeter." Daniel's voice wavered as he asked, "What would you have me do?" Marcus smiled, a cold and cruel expression. "Lead them into my trap. Make them believe they're winning." Outside, soldiers sharpened blades and prepared siege weapons under the glow of torches. Marcus poured wine into a goblet and said, "By the time they realize, their rebellion will be nothing but ashes." Daniel nodded silently, his guilt buried beneath fear. Night had fallen when Thomas gathered the rebels around a crude table. Eleanor stood close, her hand brushing his arm for comfort. Samuel slammed his hammer onto the table and said, "We strike the garrison tomorrow." Daniel stepped forward, spreading a map with exaggerated confidence. "There's a weak point here," he explained, pointing to a narrow path. Thomas studied Daniel's face, but found only calm determination. Eleanor frowned, sensing unease but saying nothing. Thomas finally nodded and said, "Then we move at dawn." Outside, the wind howled like a warning as Daniel's betrayal wove its silent thread into the plan. The rebels charged at dawn, their battle cries ringing through the valley. Thomas led with unyielding determination, sword flashing in the rising sun. Eleanor followed, her heart pounding as arrows rained down. Samuel's hammer crashed into enemy shields with deafening force. But as they reached the supposed weak point, Marcus's soldiers emerged from hidden positions, surrounding them. Daniel froze, feigning shock as chaos erupted. Thomas shouted, "It's a trap!" Soldiers closed in from all sides as the rebels fought desperately for survival. Blood soaked the ground as their hope crumbled, and Marcus's laughter echoed across the battlefield like thunder. Amidst the smoldering battlefield, Anna crouched behind a broken cart, her breath trembling as she watched Marcus's men celebrate their victory. Through the smoke, she saw Daniel slip into Marcus's camp and bow his head before him. Anna's hands flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Marcus handed Daniel a gold medallion and said, Your loyalty will be rewarded." Anna gasped, realizing the truth. She turned and ran, determined to reach Thomas before it was too late. Behind her, Marcus raised his goblet, unaware that his secret had been witnessed, the night sky glowing red with the fires of betrayal. The rebel camp was silent, lit only by scattered torches swaying in the wind. Thomas sat alone, head in his hands, burdened by their crushing defeat. Eleanor approached cautiously, her face pale and tear-streaked. Anna burst into the clearing, breathless and trembling. "Thomas!" she cried, clutching her parchment. Thomas looked up sharply. "Anna, what happened?" Anna sobbed. "Marcus knows everything. There's a traitor among us." Eleanor gasped, stepping back in shock. Anna's voice broke as she continued. "I saw Daniel with Marcus. He gave him our plans." Thomas staggered to his feet, rage and heartbreak warring within him. The revelation tore through the camp like a blade, leaving trust shattered and hope fractured. As Thomas tried to regain control, a cold voice drifted from the shadows. The shadow figure emerged, their cloak fluttering in the wind. "Your rebellion teeters on the edge," they said, stepping forward. Eleanor narrowed her eyes, asking, "Whose side are you really on?" The shadow figures slowly removed their hood, revealing a scarred face hardened by loss. "I was never your enemy," they declared. "Marcus murdered my family. I've been feeding you intelligence to ensure his fall." Daniel stumbled forward from the darkness, shock clear on his face. "You!" he hissed. The shadow figure smirked. "Yes, me. And now, Daniel, the game is over." Daniel fell to his knees, trembling as the rebels encircled him. Thomas's voice was low but filled with fury. "Why, Daniel? Why betray us?" Daniel's eyes glistened with tears. "Marcus threatened my sister," he confessed, voice breaking. "If I didn't obey, she would die." Eleanor's breath caught as she whispered, "You still doomed us all." Daniel pounded the ground with his fists. "I had no choice." Anna cried, "There's always a choice." Marcus' name hung over them like a curse, his cruelty now clear to all. Thomas turned away, torn between justice and mercy, knowing their unity was fractured beyond repair. The camp erupted in arguments, voices clashing like blades. Eleanor pleaded, "We need to stay united, or Marcus will crush us all." Samuel raised his booming voice, "We can't follow a leader who was deceived so easily." Thomas clenched his fists, fighting to be heard. "I failed you once, but I will not fail again," he declared. Anna stepped forward, holding the parchment high. "Marcus plans to attack at dawn. If we don't act now, we'll be slaughtered." Silence fell as the truth sank in. Thomas met Eleanor's gaze, seeing her trust flicker back to life. He lifted his sword. "Then at dawn, we fight." As the first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon, Thomas stood at the edge of the forest, overlooking Marcus' fortified camp. Eleanor joined him, her face calm yet resolute. Behind them, the rebels gathered silently, weapons ready. The shadow figure appeared beside Thomas, whispering, "Marcus will not expect a strike this bold." Anna clutched Thomas's arm, whispering, "For everyone we've lost, don't let this be in vain." Thomas raised his sword high, his voice steady. "Today, we take back our future." The rebels surged forward like a wave, the final battle beginning as sunlight broke through the mist. Dawn broke with a pale, cold light as Thomas stood atop a ridge, overlooking Marcus's heavily fortified camp. The distant clang of weapons and the beat of war drums echoed through the valley. Eleanor joined him, her expression calm but resolute, her dagger gripped tightly. Anna stood close behind, trembling but determined. Samuel planted his hammer into the ground, his booming voice cutting through the morning mist. "We fight for every life stolen by Marcus." The shadow figure appeared silently, their presence commanding. Thomas raised his sword high and shouted, "Today we take back our freedom." The rebels roared, their cries rolling like thunder, ready to meet destiny head-on. The clash of steel rang out as the rebels surged forward, colliding with Marcus's soldiers in a storm of fury. Thomas fought at the front, his blade cutting through enemy lines. Eleanor darted between foes, her movements sharp and precise. Samuel's hammer struck with bone-shattering force, scattering soldiers. Anna ran behind the fighters, carrying supplies and tending to the wounded, her fear replaced by purpose. The shadow figure vanished into the chaos, striking unseen from the shadows. Marcus appeared on the hilltop, his booming voice rallying his troops. The battlefield became a maelstrom of blood, fire, and cries for freedom. Thomas fought his way through the chaos, eyes locked on Marcus. Eleanor shouted, "Thomas, wait!" But he pressed forward. Marcus descended from the hill, sword drawn, his expression cold and unyielding. Their blades met with a deafening clash, sparks flying. Marcus sneered, "You think history will remember you?" Thomas gritted his teeth, replying, "History remembers those who fight for freedom." Around them, the battle raged, but all focus narrowed to this duel. Marcus struck with brutal strength, while Thomas countered with speed and determination, their movements echoing the fate of an entire people. As Thomas faltered under Marcus' strength, Daniel appeared suddenly, rushing into the fray. Marcus raised his sword for a killing blow, but Daniel threw himself between them. "No!" Daniel shouted, taking the strike meant for Thomas. Eleanor screamed as Thomas caught Daniel's collapsing body. Marcus snarled, stepping back. Daniel's breaths came shallow and fast. "I betrayed you," he whispered, blood staining his lips. "But not today." Thomas gripped his hand, tears burning in his eyes. "You're forgiven," he said. With his last strength, Daniel urged, "End this, for all of us." His eyes closed, his final act a redemption sealed in sacrifice. Fueled by Daniel's sacrifice, Thomas surged forward with a roar, striking Marcus with a flurry of blows. Marcus staggered, rage twisting his features. "You are nothing," he bellowed. Thomas shouted, "I am everyone you've tried to destroy." With a final decisive strike, Marcus fell, his weapon clattering to the ground. Silence rippled across the battlefield as soldiers froze, their leader defeated. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, weeping with relief. Anna clutched Thomas's arm, whispering, "It's over." The shadow figure watched silently from the edge of the field, their face unreadable. Victory had come, but at a cost that would haunt them forever. The battlefield lay silent, littered with broken weapons and lifeless bodies as smoke curled into the gray morning sky. Thomas knelt beside Daniel's still form, his hands trembling as Eleanor placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Anna stood nearby, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. Samuel slowly lowered his hammer, his voice heavy with grief. "We won, but at what cost?" Eleanor whispered, "So many gone, so much lost." The rebels gathered in silence, their victory muted by sorrow. Thomas rose, his expression carved by pain, knowing their triumph had been paid for with blood. The valley echoed with the cries of mourning, a grim reminder of what freedom demands. In the heart of the ruined village, the surviving rebels assembled as the sun began to break through the clouds. Thomas stood beside Eleanor, Anna, and Samuel, their faces somber, yet determined. The shadow figure appeared briefly, silent and watchful, before melting back into the mist. Anna stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "Marcus is gone, but his shadow remains. We must rebuild what he destroyed." Eleanor squeezed Anna's hand, whispering, "You have the heart to lead us." The rebels raised their weapons, not in war but in unity. Thomas watched as hope flickered to life, fragile but unstoppable. As preparations for rebuilding began, Thomas searched for the shadow figure, but found only whispers and traces of their passage. At the edge of the village, Eleanor approached quietly. "They're gone, aren't they?" she asked softly. Thomas nodded, his voice low. "They were never meant to stay." From a distant hilltop, the shadow figures stood alone, watching silently as the village came to life. Without a word, they turned and vanished into the wilderness, their true motives and future path a mystery. Eleanor took Thomas's hand, knowing some secrets were destined to remain in shadow forever. Thomas sat alone on a fallen tree at the forest's edge, the sounds of rebuilding drifting faintly from the village behind him. Eleanor approached quietly, sitting beside him in silence. After a long pause, she said, You gave them hope, Thomas. He shook his head slowly. We gave it to each other, he replied. Anna appeared, carrying a folded banner salvaged from the battlefield. She placed it beside Thomas, saying, "This belongs to all of us now." Samuel's laughter echoed faintly in the distance as he worked with villagers. Thomas stared at the banner, reflecting on sacrifice and the fragile peace they had won. As twilight deepened, Thomas walked alone through the smoky remnants of the battlefield. The wind carried the faint scent of ash and memory. He stopped at Daniel's grave, marked by a simple wooden cross. Kneeling, Thomas placed a blood-stained cloth over the earth. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking. Behind him, the world was quiet, the cost of freedom etched into every scarred tree and burned stone. Rising slowly, Thomas turned away and walked into the gathering mist, his silhouette fading into darkness as the rebellion's final chapter closed in silence.